This weekend, as I was doing my research and trying to figure out what's going to happen to the S&P 500, is it going to continue to go up? And particularly at a year, when 50% of the world's population will vote on who the new leader of their country is. I said, well, who runs this world? Who owns the economy and is managing the monetary system that we work under? And I came to the realization in my research that 132,000 families own 24% of the world's economy. So I said to myself, who is it most important to than which way the S&P 500 goes, who gets elected as the president of the United States and the president or emperor of any number of countries? Who are these people? Well, here's a list of the 20 richest people and families in the world. These people care much more about what the stock market is going to do and who is going to get elected than you and I do, because they have more at risk. And so I sat back and I said to myself, if I were one of them, what would I be concerned about right now? Well, certainly I would be concerned that my world that I own a major part of is going further and further in debt. And at the same time, there are 6 companies that are running the world. And yes, I may own one of them, but is that something I think I'm comfortable with? When I look at the S&P 500 and say that of those 400, there are 494 companies in it who are not doing well, but there are 6 companies that are doing, is that healthy? Is that something that I want to perpetuate, or do I need to influence it in some way that it gets reset, and maybe then even we work to make the world more equitable for those 84% of the people in the world who own no assets? Is that the right way to go? And how should I react to that, and how should I influence it? Do you think they do influence it? I think they do. I know I would. Would I say, well, I just want to accumulate more wealth? I don't think so. I think enough is enough, but I want to protect what I've got. What does worry me, though, is that particularly in this country, and I think around the world, the unrest, the people who are willing to walk hundreds of thousands of miles to break into a country where they think they might have a better life, and then come to that country and misbehave. If I was one of the richest 20, I'd see I need to work to make sure that doesn't happen. I need to make sure that my government, of which I really control. I mean, you aren't going to find either Donald Trump or Joe Biden, or Vladimir Putin, or Xi Jinping in those 132,000 families that own 24% of the world's economy. Joe and Donald and Vladimir and Xi Jinping are not the decision makers. These are the decision makers. These are the people who are going to decide who our next president is. These are the people who are going to decide what's going to happen to the banking system when this bank aid package expires on March the 11th of 2024. You know, the package they put together so the banks could survive what happened to Silicon Valley Bank, so that they could go put up assets that weren't generating the revenue that they needed, and put it up for collateral and then be lent money so that they could keep their operations. Well, that's ending March the 11th. And I'll show you a chart that shows you that around March, there are going to be some real decisions made. First of all, Jerome will make a decision whether he's going to lower interest rates. That will not be Jerome's decision. That's going to be Janet's decision. Janet is the one paying the bill for the debt. And she's being backed into a corner, and she needs lower interest rates. Well, when they lower the interest rates, what's that going to affect these banks who just lost their ability to put up lower valued assets as collateral to borrow money? What's going to happen to them? March is a critical month. And I think by June, you're going to see that S&P 500 come down somewhere between 15 and 20%. That's when we buy, because the bonanza starts in 2025. The bonanza, the biggest growth that this world has ever seen, starts in 2025. Did you read about Sam Altman, the guy who founded ChatGPT a year ago last November, and that everybody got excited about? He is on a quest to raise between $5 and $7 trillion to form the company that is going to drive AI and machine learning. Why do you think that's happening? Who do you think's going to raise that $5 to $7 trillion to take control of artificial intelligence? It's the 132,000 people who own 24% of this economy, because that is the biggest threat they have to their well-being from this point on in the world. This is the one thing that could take away their accumulated wealth of $20 trillion. That's who's going to put up the $5 to $7 trillion that Sam needs to put some security around what they've accumulated, because it's coming in jeopardy. These are the things you need to know. Now what I want to show you is why I believe our buying opportunity is going to come shortly after March 11th, when the bank rules change, when the 132 families step up and say, this is who we want for president of the United States and president of every other country in the world, because we have a vested interest, not to make more money, but to have a peaceful world that works in harmony and is driven by our $7 trillion company that is going to control artificial intelligence. This is what's happening. All you've got to do is connect the dots. Now, let me show you that chart.
Best of Us Investors presents Kerry Griegmeyer.
This is the chart I was speaking of that gives me some indication as to where my buying opportunity will come. It's a S&P 500 chart, and it's a weekly chart, as you can see, and I've put it together on Trading Views, one of those things I don't think you can function without. And if you don't have it, you can get a discount on it in the description. As you can see, I'm tracking really the S&P 500 starting from the low point of the corona crisis, because that's when it started to grow. That's when the federal government started throwing money at the S&P and every other stock, and that's when it moved up. The blue line represents a 50-week moving average, and as you can see, if we stay if we stay above the 50-week, we're on a pretty good trajectory coming up. And then it's when we drop below it that we come down. The other thing I want you to notice in the peaks and valleys, this down here, this is a relative strength index. And as you can see, when it gets above this 80 percentile line, you can see it then starts to move down. So you watch to see, okay, it's getting up over the 80%. It's actually up to here at 102. You can predict that, well, pretty likely it's going to correct itself. It's going to come down. It's going to consolidate. It will climb back up. So your buy and sell points are, this is a sell point, this is a buy point, this is a sell point, this is a buy point. And so that gives you some direction. And then it stays above its support level, which is again tracking from the coronavirus low. It then hits the low here, it bounces off here, it bounces off here, and then it goes up. Then we have here a resistance level that was established all the way back in November of 2021, and it bounced off it there. And then it rallied up. This happened to be right after Sam introduced us to AI or ChatGPT, and we had a bump up. We only had a bump down in the first week in January, and this is when the brokers, the Wall Street, pushed it up to fill their book out and to create a good position, because you can see their actual growth from January of 2022 to January of 2024 was a flat line. They didn't make any money for those 2 years. If you bought at the high in January of 2022, you didn't make any money until this last January. So that's why we saw this bump down. Then we saw the surge up. Now, what's this little building about? That's the March 11th ending of the bank rescue plan by the Fed. At this point, they are saying, we up until here, they said, we will loan you money for a year, and then you're on your own. And so we then have compounding that, the problems we're having with commercial real estate. So I see this as a pivot point. I see this as when Janet comes to Jerome and says, Jerome, enough is enough. My interest payment on our national debt is getting out of hand. I can't keep it up. I can't keep these banks fluid or liquid at the rate we're going. We need to lower interest rates. And I've shown you in the past, when the interest rates go down, that affects liquidity. That means the banks say, hey, I can't, and because we're in a inverted yield curve, I can't make any money lending money on mortgages for 30 years at 3%. We've seen that, and it's a disaster. So they will tighten money. When money tightens, the market comes down. So I'm predicting that this will probably go up just a bit more. I think we're at about 5,050 now. And I think it's going to come down, and it will be that Jerome will start lowering interest rates, possibly as quickly as March. And by sometime around June, this market will turn and it will take off. And that's when we buy. We buy when we get down to somewhere around between 44 and 45. That's probably as low as it's going to go. Now, why is that going to happen? Because for the most part, there are only 6 stocks that are doing extremely well. That means everybody's in them. At our stock talk on Friday, Frank asked me, I've got more profits right now, Kerry, because of your recommendations of NVIDIA and a supermacro computer. I've got more profits than I've ever had in my life. What should I do with it? I said, well, the first thing I do is I take my money out of it. If you put 10,000 in and you've now got 30,000, I take my 10,000 out and work on the market's 20. Then I'd put a stop loss. And that needs to be where you're comfortable. Is it 5% or is it 10%? If we drop 5%, Frank will liquidate. And so will every other amateur investor in this market. And that will drop. It will drop and it will tumble. And the fear of losing out will come in. And we may go below 45. We may get down to 43. But once we get there, that is when we buy back into the big 6. That is back when we buy back into the semiconductor companies that have crashed and now are going to come back. Because if you'll read what Sam said when he said he needed $5 to $7 trillion, he said we need to build the semiconductor industry in the United States. Well, who is that? That's all the people who got hurt because of the pullback, because of the lack of interest in electric vehicles, because you're not buying a new PC, because you're not buying a new phone. That's who Sam says, I need a $7 trillion company to make sure we have the ability to produce those semiconductors here in the United States. That's where my Bus 13 portfolio will skyrocket. That's where my Bus 12 portfolio will skyrocket. And that's going to be the best investment opportunity in your lifetime and my lifetime. And I'm 79 years old. It's going to happen, right? This is called a cup, and you can see the cup and the handle. Okay, now it's going to come up here and it's going to come back down. And that's where you and I are going to load the boat. Load the boat with the Bus 12 and the Bus 13 stocks. If you don't know what I'm talking about, come to my website. Come to Best of Us Investors and join our Platinum Bus. Now, in the link, I'm going to give you a 50% discount for 90 days. I want to prove to you that over the next 90 days, I can make you wealthy. Okay? We can make you wealthy. We are turning this into a team sport. We talk every Friday, and I get the input of 1,000 people, and we're going to grow that to 5,000 people, and we're going to share our life experiences, and we're going to make money together. And then I'm going to work with you so that when I put in an order for something, you get a text. When I put in an order to change that order, you get a text. When I close that order, you get a text. When I sell something, you get a text. And that text isn't going to be just for me. That is going to be the cumulative knowledge of the 5,000 people that we're going to have on this Platinum Bus monitoring these markets. How did I learn about this? At my last Friday's meeting, Mark said, you need to watch this video. I spent 5 hours watching a series of videos. I then spent another 5 hours digesting it and building this chart. And then discovering that 132,000 families own 24% of the world's economy, and they run this world. They have to. They have a vested interest. They will decide who is the next president of the United States. They will decide who is the next president of Russia, of Yugoslavia, of whatever. They will decide when this market is ready to be reset and take off. They will decide when Jerome and Janet lower interest rates. Why? Because they own 24% of the world's economy. They own it. So don't you think they have a vested interest in seeing to it that their grandchildren maintain ownership of something that's worth something? Don't you think that's the most important thing on their mind right now? Protecting what they've got. Now that you know who runs the world, who owns the economy, you just need to get on the bus.